I'm in such a good mood. All right, my friends, welcome. It's Monday, March 18th, 2024. I'm in a really good mood. I bet you all know why, but we're going to talk about it this morning. The breaking news this morning, as I think many of you have probably already heard, is that Trump cannot make bond in the New York civil fraud case. This is a huge deal for a variety of reasons. It absolutely does have an impact on the 2024 election. More on that in a minute. But at the time being, I'm going to just enjoy the schadenfreude. All right. First things first, I'm coming to you as always from occupied Tongva territory here in Southern California. Today, for our visually challenged viewers, I'm wearing a black and cream striped blouse. I have my thick gold hoops in, my hair is down. I'm a pink-skinned, green-eyed, dirty blonde-haired woman, and I'm sitting in my home office in front of my plant and my standing lamp and my big cushy chair, which is oatmeal colored. Yeah, I'm in a really good mood. So we're going to talk about all of this, but essentially what happened this morning was that Trump filed a reply in front of the Court of Appeals, the appellate division in New York State Court, stating that he has consulted with more than 30 bond companies and no one will give him a bond for the now approaching $500 million judgment that Tish James obtained against him in the New York civil fraud case in front of Judge Engoron. This is a very big deal because if the Court of Appeals does not allow him leeway on the bond, Tish James can start seizing assets of the defendants as soon as next week. March 26th is the deadline, I believe. And so one of the things of this, I have to remind everybody that this is not just about Donald Trump. It's also about the Trump Organization, Don Jr., Eric Trump, Alan Weisselberg, and other senior officials inside the Trump Organization itself. But the biggest impact, of course, is to the Trump Organization and Donald Trump. So I have to tell you all that this means some very specific things in terms of how surety bonds are obtained, because ordinarily you either have to have the cash to put up or you have to have assets to put up in the form of collateral to secure the bond. What this basically means is that Trump is not just broke, but lacking in the assets that he would need to even put up a portion of the amount that he owes. Now, I have to remind everybody of some things about this, which I think get forgotten in the context of all of this, all right? Since the days of The Apprentice, what Trump has really been is more of a branding operation than a real estate mogul. All right. One example of this is that I'm speaking to the New Yorkers now, but what a lot of New Yorkers know is that there used to be a series of towers along the west side of Manhattan that were Trump branded. Those towers were not owned by Donald Trump. Okay, they're owned by the co-ops in the building, as is the case in a lot of buildings in New York City. And at the time that Trump was elected president, those co-op boards voted to remove his name from the building because essentially all he had given them was a branding deal. He didn't actually own the buildings themselves. Okay, the same is true, by the way, for a lot of these like Trump towers all over the country. He doesn't actually own those real estate assets. He is simply given a license to use his name on the towers themselves. All right. We also know that he owns almost nothing of Trump Tower any longer. He owns the retail space on the bottom. He owns his own apartment and some very sporadic other assets in the building, but that's it. Most of the building is owned by people who have bought into condominiums there. Okay. So his assets are not anywhere near what he claims. And then on top of it, this morning, he's saying that the assets that he does own should be enough to secure the bond. Well, I just have to say something. If you talk to 30 bond companies and insurance companies, and no one thinks your assets are worth that enough to give you a bond, the idea that the Court of Appeals should then say, oh, no worries, we're going to assume that Mar-a-Lago is worth the $1 billion that you claim it is a real reach. Okay? Because in any other circumstance, his ownership of those properties would be enough to secure the bond. All right. So one of the things that has been a big question since like last fall is whether or not he even owns Mar-a-Lago anymore. At the time, there was a bit of a news story of sorts that seemed to indicate that perhaps Mar-a-Lago had been transferred to a holding company run by Don Jr. Eric Trump then disputed that, but nobody really knows what the story is there, like whether or not he even owns Mar-a-Lago. The other thing I have to remind everybody about Mar-a-Lago is that it is not zoned as his personal residence. It is zoned as a social club. And so it cannot be sold as a personal residence, which might raise the value of it. And the last time it was assessed, it was for $18 million. Now, remind everybody, he owes almost $500 million in judgments, fines, and interest now in New York State. So he's in a situation right now where it would be very hard for the appeals court to look at this situation and say, oh, yes, you have the real estate assets to secure this. Not to mention that what was he just found liable of that has resulted in this enormous bond that he needs to put up? Lying about the value of his real estate assets. That's literally what he was found liable for by the judge. So we're in a situation right now where, ordinarily, if he had the assets or the cash, this would not be a big deal. What this is saying is that he's broke, and also that his real estate assets, such as he claims they are out there, are not actually either existing to the degree that he claims they are, or are worth what he claims they are to the extent that anybody is going to loan him the money. The other thing I have to say here is he has mentioned the Seven Springs estate in this. That is also not worth the amount that he's claiming in these papers it's worth. And we know that because that was one of the properties that was subject to the overinflated valuation in the trial. So he's kind of screwed now because unless the Court of Appeals cuts him a break, which I think is very unlikely, let's just remember, this is the same appellate court that refused to extend to him all of the many, many things that he tried to appeal during the Engoron trial, right? They have dismissed every claim that he's made here without any kind of qualm. So, the other thing I'm just going to say here is that even if they were to reduce the amount of the bond, it's unclear that he would even be able to make that amount. He's made the $90 million bond in the E. Jean Carroll case, but that at this point is 1/5 of what he has to put up in the New York civil fraud case, and nobody will give it to him. The other thing I just want to mention about this, by the way, because there are some people this morning who are like, oh, this is a real national security threat. Where is he going to get this money from? Listen to me. If he already had this money from a foreign source, he would not be asking the court to let him proceed with an appeal without it. So even his foreign donors, so to speak, are not getting into this game because they know they're not going to get their money back. And they also are looking at everything that the rest of us are looking at about the likelihood of him being reelected and going not sure I'm going to bet on that. This also means, by the way, that Elon Musk isn't wading into this one. So this is a really interesting moment because I'm just going to point out, if the appeals court doesn't cut him a break, which I really don't think they're going to do, and Tish James can start seizing assets next week, one of the things that they're going to be able to seize is his plane. What does he use that plane for? Campaigning. He uses that plane to fly all over the country to give his far-right racist bloodbath talks to his dwindling number of cult members. So the potential impact of this on his 2024 presidential campaign is extreme. And also, given that they can start seizing assets, if he still does own Mar-a-Lago, or Don Jr. owns Mar-a-Lago because he's a defendant, they can go after those assets. Whatever the Trump organization owns, they can go after. They can freeze bank accounts. So it's about to get really, really ugly next week for Donald Trump. Not that I mind. And I don't think that we're in a situation here, as I've said now for the third time, I just want to reiterate this. I think it is very, very unlikely that the appellate court in New York State is going to cut him a break on this. They got no moment for this. They're not going to give him special treatment. New Yorkers are New Yorkers for a reason, including when they sit on appellate courts of appeal. So this is a turning point moment. And I'm also just going to say one other thing. This is a moment where the entire mythology of Donald Trump is being erased in real time. Because if he truly was a billionaire, quote unquote, or even just a $100 millionaire person, this would not be an issue. But he's not. He's not. He's living off the grift right now. And by the way, if you haven't looked lately, his donation numbers are way down. So this is a moment where, things could turn very dramatically against him. And I'm just going to say one other thing. This may be one reason why all of his incendiary outbursts this weekend, in this context, might make a little bit more sense. Because as I have said here, and I said this yesterday when, the far right was like, he didn't mean a bloodbath. First of all, he's been this person forever. Like, we've known this, right? This is just yet another extension. But those of you who have been here since 7 years ago when we started this broadcast will remember that all the way back in 2017, I did a broadcast about extinction bursts, which is a behavioral phenomenon usually used in dog training, by the way, also effective in raising children, where when new boundaries are set around someone or an animal, a dog animal in positive dog training, they may accelerate the poor behavior before the moment where it really comes to an end. And there is a very similar phenomenon with malignant narcissists, fundamentally, where when the walls start closing in and they get boxed in more and more, their pathology rises more and more to the surface. There was a lot of posts about this from psychological professionals on Threads this weekend, that what we are actually seeing is the true nature of his pathology, because he can't hide it anymore. His entire narcissistic mythology is falling apart. And that's on top of the fact that he's like in very serious mental decline. So I said late last week that one of the things that people needed to really look at was the fact that he was going to get worse, and he was going to get worse in real time, and nothing should surprise us, right? Like, our job, I said this yesterday on Threads also, is to keep our noses to the grindstone, to continue getting out the vote, to continue mobilizing where we live, doing deep canvassing, text banking, phone banking, door knocking, all the things that we need to do to win in November, because he's going to get crazier. He's not going to get any better. Like, it's only going to get worse from here on out. And when these kinds of accountability dominoes start to fall, he is going to say things that are beyond outrageous, okay? The promise of a bloodbath, which is essentially a demand for like another January 6th, but worse, is going to look like child's play by the time we get to the Republican National Convention. So I have to remind everybody that you've got to just like dial back a little bit on this and expect that the crazy is going to go to like level 11, because it is. And the fascism is going to be like out there for all to see. He's not going to be able to run away from it. And nobody's going to be able to deny it as hard as they try. So as these things start beginning to crush him, right? And this is a real moment. This is the moment where his entire mythology of extreme wealth and like, all the things that he built with like, the money that his dad gave him, all a lie. We already knew that. But all of that mythology is gone, because before too long, he may not even have a place to live. And that's the reality of the execution of civil judgments in circumstances like this. Tish James can seize his assets starting next week if the appeals court doesn't throw him a bone. And I don't think they're going to. Okay. Like, even if they were to reduce it, I don't think he's going to be able to get another bond. This seems very, very clear to me. And if the foreign donors are not in this, it's going to get worse. All right. Wait a minute. Hang on. Let me find the troll. Hang on. I will get the person. All right. Anyway, so, all right. I don't know who it is. Somebody identify the troll to me and I'll make sure they get blocked. All right. Point being that we are sitting at a moment right now where everybody should be paying very, very close attention to the turning point. And I happen to agree. Someone in the comments is saying, I doubt a full sale could raise the cash after the lien holders are paid. That's right. I don't even think he has the assets to secure this judgment. Right? I'm not convinced his net worth is $500 million. There was evidence introduced in the second E. Jean Carroll case that he had said that he had $400 million of cash. I said at the time when that evidence was introduced that I didn't believe that. He may have said it, but I never thought that was actually the reality of it. And his money's gone. Like, we don't know what he put up to secure that $90 million bond in the E. Jean Carroll appeal, but that may have been the last of his money. And if we are in this situation right now, my bet at this point is that we're like, days away from very serious implications in terms of the seizure of assets to the 2024 election. We have 1,469 people watching live right now, which is amazing. Could you please hit the thumbs up on this broadcast if it is informing you and educating you right now? Don't forget to hit subscribe here on the channel. And I will also just mention, if you want to ask me questions before every broadcast, which you can do, head on over to patreon.com/resistance live, become a paid subscriber for as little as $2 a month. That's less than 10 cents a broadcast. I'm here 6 days a week for our Patreon subscribers, live here for everybody 5 days a week. Please head on over there if you haven't done it yet. Think of it like NPR or PBS. This is how I support my staff and myself, and I'm here all day long to answer questions for you guys, whether that's an emergency broadcast or on the daily broadcast. We're here every day at 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 noon Eastern. All right. I have to talk for a minute about some other developments because in addition to the kind of like bloodbath comment over the weekend, there was some breaking news this morning that Paul Manafort is going to be brought back. Sorry. You all know that I have these moments sometimes when I'm live on the air where the only thing I can do is laugh because it's so crazy and so outrageous that it's hard to kind of like fathom that this is the timeline that we're living in. Manafort is apparently going to be brought back into the campaign. Paul Manafort, who was like pardoned by Donald Trump and convicted of all sorts of crimes and corruption, right? Who we know passed American voter data to an agent for the Russian government in the middle of the 2016 campaign. Like, you can't make this stuff up. So one thing that I do have to mention here is if Manafort happens to be brought back in, I want everybody to know exactly what it means. What it means is that the Russians are directly involved again in the Trump campaign in some form or another, because what follows Manafort down the road is like the Kremlin. All right. So I don't know, we'll have to see how this plays out. Obviously, he's scraping the bottom of the barrel right now. His only option has been to like take over the entire RNC because he doesn't have any campaign staff and he doesn't have any money. So the question of whether or not there is going to be a true role for Manafort to play is yet to be confirmed, but it should be raising alarm bells for everyone. And I did say to someone this morning, the editor-in-chief of Mother Jones, who we go back and forth a fair amount on threads these days, I did say that, for obvious reasons, Donald Trump is like the biggest national security threat that we have right now that is like in the public domain. There are plenty of cybersecurity threats going on, I am certain, all the time, right? That we don't know about, that are being managed from inside the Department of Homeland Security. But in terms of like the public awareness, it's Donald Trump, right? Because the reality is that he is so desperate right now that he would probably do anything to get money. Because if he's going to lose Mar-a-Lago, they're going to lose Seven Springs. There's no question about it. He's going to lose his plane. He's going to lose any other real estate assets that he has. I think, honestly, we may be days away from the sign coming down on the front of Trump Tower. Woo! I have to find my picture, by the way, from back in the day of me like standing in front of Trump Tower. Also in front of Trump's golf club here in Southern California. I got another one like that also. From the standpoint of where we are, I do want everybody to be very, very aware that, there isn't going to be a better outcome for Trump, right? We really are at the moment right now where things are turning very dramatically against him. And so to me, I just want everybody to be really clear on this. All right. We do have a long way to go between now and November, and nobody can get complacent. But when he's out of cash and his entire mythology has been destroyed, that's going to mean very significant things for people inside the cult. Why? Because one of the things that has been proven about cult deprogramming, again, like, here we go. You all ask me these questions like, my grandmother is stuck in the Trump cult. What do I do about it? The answer I always have to give is that there has to be a moment of awakening inside the person who's in the cult that they have been lied to. Okay. When Trump's entire mythology falls apart, his plane is seized, his home is seized, Trump Tower's sign comes down, when all of his assets are taken away from him and he's scraping the bottom of the barrel to like just simply fly somewhere to give a rally, that is going to be a moment that is a turning point for the people who are still already in the cult. But it doesn't change the fact that our work in 2024 has to be dealing with disaffected and disenchanted voters who aren't paying attention to any of this the way that all of us are. Right? We have to make absolutely certain that that's who we're targeting. And so that means that we can't just like either be completely overjoyed that Trump is being destroyed in real time or assume that we're going to win the election because the cult is falling away. We have to still keep doing the work. And so I've said really honestly since the middle of 2023 that in some sense we have to ignore the noise. I'm not going to deny anybody this moment of Schadenfreude, but I'm just going to tell you that we can't stop doing the work. So to answer this question, why aren't his kids putting up the cash? Okay, I said this last week, and I want to remind everybody of some very significant things here. Jared Kushner's cash is not liquid. Does everybody get that? The money that he got from the Saudis is in a hedge fund. If he takes that money and uses it for his dad, he's going to be in deep trouble with the Saudi kingdom. And I'm just going to remind you all of what happens to enemies of the Saudi kingdom, in case you forgot. Jamal Khashoggi is one example of this. Jared Kushner's not going to take Saudi money to bail out his dad. And I also just have to point something else out. Jared Kushner's own father went to prison. I will say a few things about Jared Kushner. I'm going to remind you all, back when Jared and Ivanka were Democrats, we used to know each other. A long time ago in New York City, all right? One thing I will say for Jared Kushner is that while he was absolutely unqualified to work in the White House, never should have done it, he knows how to cover his own ass. And so, by the way, does Ivanka. They're not going to wade into the middle of this at this moment in time. They may be fascists, they may be performative, they may be doing all sorts of shady business deals on the side, but they're not going to get into an exposure around this stuff where their father is about to go to prison. So it's kind of over in this regard with regard to Trump's money, as long as the Court of Appeals doesn't toss him a bone. All right. Manafort is something to keep an eye on. Seriously, we got to keep an eye on this because there are really serious national security threats happening right now. And honestly, I am concerned about the missing documents that were inside those classified document folders that we still haven't found. There's still documents that are missing in the document retention case. So people got to find a way to understand that, the security threat is still very, very real. All right. Couple other things I want to talk about today. Peter Navarro is reporting for prison tomorrow, in case you didn't know. I know everybody's been running around when are all these people who evaded these subpoenas going to go to jail? Well, Peter Navarro is going to prison tomorrow. He has to report. He actually appealed to the Supreme Court. I laughed at this one also because there was no way it was going to happen. He appealed to the Supreme Court and lost. And so Peter Navarro is going to prison tomorrow for evading a subpoena. I keep telling you guys, it's like hot accountability season since last August when these indictments drops. It's not ending. None of this is ending. All right. The other thing that I want people to be aware of is that now that Fani Willis is staying on the case, by the way, I got to make something really clear here because there were some questions about this yesterday on our Patreon only coffee hour. And I want to clarify something here for everybody who's watching today. Okay. The order that came down on Friday from Judge McAfee, we did a breaking news broadcast about it on Friday. You can go watch it if you didn't see it. Gave Fani Willis two choices. One choice was to have Nathan Wade resign, and she could stay on the case along with her entire staff, or she could resign along with the entire staff of the district attorney's office. Nathan Wade tendered his resignation on Friday afternoon. So Fani Willis is on the case. She's not going anywhere. Neither is any of the rest of the staff, including the other special prosecutors who have been involved in the case from the beginning. So we are now in a situation where that case is back on track. And now what we're waiting on is a potential trial date. And I'm going to remind everybody, we have this 20-day delay right now in the New York City election interference case. There's a hearing coming up on that on March 25th. And we have a delay until April 15th of the trial right now. All right. So we're going to have a criminal trial sometime this spring against Donald Trump. There's also a window open right now while we're waiting for briefing to be completed on presidential immunity in front of the Supreme Court, where the January 6th case in front of Judge Chutkan in D.C. is currently on hold. Fani Willis's team previously indicated that they would only need 30 days from the time that the trial date was set to prepare for trial. Reminder, they were ready to trial these people last November. And that was before we had those 4 plea agreements in Fulton County. So what we are waiting for right now is a potential trial date in Fulton County. That's really the next step. And frankly, I think there are some windows that have opened up now that might make the original August trial date that Fani Willis had asked for pretty viable. So we'll have to see what McAfee does on that front. I personally think that this is a moment to finally start things moving after this wild goose chase about Fani Willis dating a coworker who wasn't even a coworker at the time that the relationship started, but whatever. This is a moment to get that case really right back on track. And so we're waiting again for a trial date there. So things are cooking, no money. This is the other really big question I have at the moment. And I say this as somebody who tried cases for 15 years. There are circumstances where if you don't pay your lawyers, they withdraw. When I first started practicing law in DC, I actually some of my first litigation, I did my first federal court trial case before argument, before I even had been sworn into the bar on a special petition. But some of the earliest litigations that I handled at the time were withdrawal petitions because our firm wasn't getting paid by a client. Because they're really easy motions to file. I will just tell you all that if he stops paying his lawyers, he may be without legal representation in some of these criminal matters, in which case he's going to be appointed a public defender. There's a lot of like just dominoes that could fall entirely between now and November. It's not pretty. Do I mind it? Absolutely not. All right. One thing I want to mention this morning, just as kind of like a final wrap up for today's broadcast. Somebody said to me this morning on the Patreon feed, reminder, if you are not a paid subscriber and you want to ask me questions, there's a feed that goes up 2 hours before every broadcast for our subscribers at patreon.com/resistancelive. And you can head on over there for as little as $2 a month. Subscriptions go all the way up to $100 a month with various perks. But you can ask me questions before every broadcast and I will answer them on the air. You can treat it like a donation to this very important work. I will just tell you all that there's a couple of questions that come up on the feed from time to time. And this morning was one example of them, where someone says, I don't care about the rule of law. When are we going to start taking this seriously? And Biden can just suspend X, Y, and Z so we realize the real risk of Donald Trump. Okay. So I have to say one thing about this. There's something they teach you in law school that is basically like this sort of, I don't know what you'd call it. It's like a saying that hard cases make bad law. So what does that mean? It means that if you have a really bad set of facts and you apply or change the law to that set of facts in a novel way, you end up with really bad law that then is applied in very dangerous ways down the road. Because reminder, precedents get set, right? So if, for instance, Joe Biden was going to try to do something ridiculous here, like, let's just say hypothetically, do something to keep Trump from, I don't know, being able to kind of like speak in public. Okay. First of all, that would be a violation of the First Amendment. All right. It would be a violation of all sorts of campaign laws. But the end result of that would be, okay, well, so Trump's a fascist, so we're going to suspend the First Amendment. Well, then what happens the next time that we've got a real threat to democracy, right? Does that mean that Democratic candidates can be silenced? Does it mean that political commentators or activists or mobilizers, also me, can be like arrested? Does it mean that we're going to invoke the FCC and not give him any airtime? Does that mean that the same is going to be done for like anybody else who ever runs for president? No. So one of the things that I want people to really understand here is that the way that you save democracy from fascism is with democracy. You don't save democracy from fascism by eradicating democratic norms. And so this is a moment to remind you all that, like, no matter what happens going forward here, right? Like, let's just say hypothetically that all the trials are off. That's not going to happen. But let's just say hypothetically, all the trials suddenly get stayed. The end result is still November 3rd. The end result is still the exercise of democracy in America. And that's one reason why, like, literally for, I don't know, the last 3 years here on this broadcast, I've been telling everybody that you have to get involved where you live. Volunteer to be a precinct captain. Show up to be a poll worker. Show up to be a poll monitor. Make sure that you get involved with local candidates that you care about. Know who's running for your school board. Know who's running for your state legislature. Because, by the way, you care about abortion rights. You care about gun control. That's where all that stuff is happening right now. You have trans kids in your life you want to protect. You got to pay attention to what's happening locally. All of that results in this reverse coattails phenomenon where when you get involved locally, it changes things all the way up the ballot. All right. And I'm going to say we have a lot of new viewers here today. We're at 1875 live right now on this broadcast. I'm going to say to everybody here who's maybe never watched before, voting this year is not enough. You've got to start talking to everybody that you know about the importance of exercising their right to vote this year. You've got to start having those difficult conversations with people where you're like, here's all the things that you may not know about the great stuff that Joe Biden has accomplished, because it may just come down to us. Right? And really, honestly, it always just comes down to us, because that's what participatory democracy is all about. So I just want everybody to be very, very clear right now that we cannot change democratic norms just because Donald Trump is running for office again. What we have to actually do is lean harder into a functioning democracy. And that means we don't silence people for speaking out when they're not violating the law by doing it, right? That when Trump announces that there's going to be a bloodbath, we take it seriously and let the free press run it on the front page of every newspaper in America and lead it on every major media broadcast. That we understand that it's part of our job to inform disaffected and disenchanted voters about what's at stake. And not just from a position of fear, right? but from a position of what's possible if we actually lean really hard into democracy, right? We could codify Roe versus Wade if we take back the House and Joe Biden gets reelected. Does everybody realize that? We could actually make abortion the law of the land through legislation, right? We could expand the Supreme Court. We could tax billionaires so that there's affordable housing everywhere and hunger ends in America. We could create real reparations for the descendants of enslavement and indigenous genocide. The things that we could accomplish if we actually elect Democrats up and down the ticket are really real. They're serious. And you should be talking to people about that stuff. All right. So, yeah, I think that's it for today. I'm going to remind everybody, we opened registration. Ooh, let me put it up here. We opened registration on this incredible new program we're running starting on April 15th called Truth or Fiction, a media literacy, disinformation, inoculation, and democracy protection program. You can register at the link right here, Gaia Leadership Project, .com/truth-or-fiction. And I will just tell you all that this program is going to teach you in real time how to battle back against disinformation online for the duration, and also how to be media literate so you don't recirculate faulty information or anything like that. Get in on that if you're interested, okay? But I'm also just going to remind everybody of this. While we take our moment today to celebrate, right? Because I give you guys the celebration, I'm going to take a little bit myself to celebrate the fact that Donald Trump's empire is over, okay? Literally, he may be done by next week. All right. While we take that moment, I also just want to remind everybody that the work continues. And one of the great things about being in communities like this with all these wonderful subscribers and friends is that we get to support each other in continuing to do that work, right? All of you are out there. I know the longtime followers are here doing great work to get out the vote. Please don't stop. Right? Please remember that it's all of us in this together, arm in arm, intersectionally, across every movement and across every issue. That's what it's going to take. But if we do it in November, good things are possible and on the horizon. All right. So stick with it and, take your moment today. And then let's get back to the work of wiping the floor and meaning with the GOP, because it's not just Trump. We have to really elect Democrats up and down the ballot. Everywhere. We have states to flip, seats to flip, legislatures to flip. We have to do it everywhere. And come November, there's a lot of enormous possibility and a huge light at the end of the tunnel if we do it right. All right. So that's it, everybody. I hope you will join us, by the way, in this fabulous new program. And even if not, if you like what we're doing here, please don't forget that you can become a paid subscriber at patreon.com/resistance live to ask me questions. And just like you would donate to NPR, if this is of value to you, if it talks you off a ledge, if it's a moment of celebration, if it informs you and helps you become a better activist, organized mobilizer, or even just talking to your friends and family about what's going on, please make sure you kick in because I have a team to pay behind me. And also, this is a huge part of my workday these days. All right, my friends, I'm so glad that you're here. I'm so grateful for all of you. Please don't forget to like the broadcast and subscribe. And I will catch you all here tomorrow morning at the latest at regular time. And of course, if there's need for a breaking news broadcast later on today, I will be back. All right, everybody. Happy Monday. It's a good day, right? I'll see you soon.